It's been a minute, so let me just refresh your memories on who I am and what I'm all about. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I am Grand Moff Tony. We are back after something of a hiatus in the start of the new year. The wedding went fantastically. Thank you so much to everyone who reached out on the wedding. I really appreciate it. It was an absolute hit, and more on that later. You know, something I picked up from the Out of the Basement boys is that you should treat every video that you make like it's someone's first video on your channel, and I kind of wanted to take that idea a little further because one of my first videos is one that never really sat well with me. I was never really satisfied with how it came out. So you know what, it's a new year, I'm having a redo. I have pretty much an entire new audience from what I had back when I started, so yeah, I'm doing this video again. A big part of being any kind of collector is the story of how you got into your collection, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you the story of my personal collecting journey with the Star Wars Black Series line. Now, as I say, I have done this video before, didn't like the lighting, I didn't like how it came out, I didn't like the fact that I looked absolutely wasted when I did it. So I'm doing this again. I'm treating this video with the respect it deserves, and considering there are some people out there who may be finding the channel for the first time, or hopefully maybe missed that first video, this will be your new introduction to the channel, and to me. Hi, I'm Grand Moff Tony. I buy a lot of toys and I talk about them on the internet. We should probably start with Star Wars in general. Now, everyone seems to have this story of the first time they discovered Star Wars, and I've always been a little jealous because I don't have that story. I don't remember the first time I watched Star Wars. It was just something I always liked. I distinctly remember being in The Entertainer in 1999 and picking up a Naboo Theed Palace playset and then having to explain to my mum why I desperately needed it, and then having my mum explain to my dad why I also needed to buy a second figure because that's what he wants to do. He wants to have the two figures fight each other in the playset. See, my mum got it. I was a massive Star Wars fan throughout my entire childhood. I would watch the special edition VHS versions over and over and over again. I practically wore out those VHS tapes, and it had a bunch of special features before each movie that took you through the changes that they had made to the film and why they had done it. I remember watching those over and over again. And of course, I was in school moving into my teenage years as the prequels were coming out. After 2005, however, I kind of dropped off. Star Wars and we didn't really talk for a very long time. I was still a big fan and I still watched The Empire Strikes Back pretty much every year on my birthday, but for the most part I transitioned over to other collections. I had a bunch of McFarlane horror figures that I collected. I had a massive collection of Transformers figures, and I even picked up a few of the old character Doctor Who figures when they were still 5 inches tall because I didn't go in for the small figures. That all changed in 2015 when a little film that you may have heard of called Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens came out. I went to the midnight screening at my local cinema by myself, and I watched it a further 7 times in the cinema while it was there. I absolutely loved it. It was a case of like, I would be talking to my friends and I would say, hey, have you seen the new Star Wars movie? You haven't? Let me take you. I don't mind seeing it again. The Force Awakens really brought me back to Star Wars, and it brought me back to a position where I was like, you know what? I remember having lots of great Star Wars toys when I was a kid. I wonder if they're still making those. And sure enough, they were. But there was something not quite right about them. Maybe I was misremembering the Star Wars figures that I used to collect back in like the late 90s and the early 2000s, but something about the mainline Star Wars figures just didn't do it for me anymore. I wanted to find something to better represent just how much I loved this franchise. Now, the problem was that in my 10-year hiatus from Star Wars, I had become spoiled by other premium toy lines. The 10-inch tall Kai Play Arts DC figures really spring to mind. Highly articulated, highly detailed, packed out with accessories that you actually wanted for the figure. So I was on the lookout for a toy line that properly captured the reignited passion that I was starting to feel inside, the long dormant fanboy that was coming back to life. Flash forward into later in December of that year, and I stumble across my first ever Black Series figure, Captain Phasma from the old Red line. Now, I had no intention of getting drawn into a toy line at that point. I just saw that 6-inch figure and thought, you know what, I've never really been a fan of these bigger figures, but I want this for my shelf. It looks really, really cool. I picked that figure up from the Toys R Us in the town across from me in Woking, and I remember taking it home and thinking, yeah, this looks good, this can go on my shelf. I've got a Star Wars toy again, maybe this will sort of sate my interest. Well, no, because shortly after that, on a trip to Leicester Square in London, I picked up the Black Series Starkiller base variant of Kylo Ren. Obviously, I loved the movie, I loved the character, I just wanted to get a really cool figure of this guy on my desk, and the Starkiller base variant was kind of a cool diorama piece, because it came with that snowy, icy base that he could stand on that I have since lost. So I'm starting to think, you know what, maybe I can get into this line, let's see what else they have to offer. Well, unfortunately, at the time, all they really had going for them were a few of the old Orange Line figures that were really peg-warming back in the day, particularly the slave outfit Leia, which I saw and went, ooh, I don't know about that, so we'll leave that. But the real nail in the coffin was the Red Line General Hux. When I saw that General Hux figure, that blank, emotionless, terrible face, it really scared me off. I was like, you know what? I don't think this is for me. And around about the same time, I also saw the Blue Line Emperor Palpatine, and obviously that figure is notorious for not being great. Well, apparently the universe had other plans, because flash forward to Christmas of 2017, I'm in my first rented house with my now wife, then girlfriend, and she bought me the Black Series Jango Fett K2SO and the first figure that she bought me, Grand Admiral Thrawn. I was blown away. I got these figures out of the box and I just had so much fun playing with them. And once I had got them on the shelf and once I had experimented properly with their articulation, I found that I am much more open to the idea of starting this collection. It kind of became something that me and my then girlfriend did together. We bought these figures together. I had introduced her to Star Wars Rebels earlier on in the year, and it became kind of our mission to go out and seek out the Rebels characters. We found Kanan and Sabine in Bristol while we were still living there. But that was really a bad time for me to be getting into a new collection because, as I say, we were living in our first rental place together. We weren't making a ton of money. In fact, the money that I had coming in didn't even cover the rent. I ended up selling my PlayStation and all of my games just to pay for the rent for a month. Those were really the dark days of my Black Series collection. I had maybe 13 of them, not including an Elite Series Supreme Leader Snoke that I had bought because I had seen the Black Series one and I still wasn't keen on it. Little did I know that would come back to haunt me with a hunt for that guy up there. And it also unfortunately coincided with the end of Toys R Us. Toys R Us shut down right in the middle of that. I remember picking up Jedi Master Luke from The Force Awakens on Toys R Us's last day. I also remember walking away from the First Order Special Forces TIE Fighter for $49.99 on that very same day. So I had my little ragtag band of figures. I loved every single one of them, and they lived on my DVD shelf, and I was always playing with them and constantly changing their positions. But ultimately, of course, that all led to my massive decision in 2018 to move my life all the way from the UK over to the US. And you know, when you're forced to pack your entire life into 2 suitcases, no more, no less, you have to make a lot of tough decisions, and unfortunately one of those tough decisions was the decision to leave my Star Wars collection behind. I still kept them. There were a great many collections that I had randomly picked up over the years that were brutally sent off to charity shops that week, but my Star Wars collection stayed. I put it in a little bag, I kept them all together, I put all of their weapons in my Yu-Gi-Oh box with all my cards where they were kept safe, but I left them behind, and I moved to America, and since I couldn't work for the first 10 months in the US, my collecting really slowed down. I didn't feel like, since I didn't have a paycheck coming in, I could just go out and buy toys whenever I saw them. But I would indulge in a toy every now and then, and of course my wife was buying me Black Series figures all the time for Christmases and birthdays. She picked up Baze and Chirrut from Rogue One from Five Below. She also bought me the General Grievous Bandai model kit because back in those days we didn't have the Black Series. Series figure. So the collection slowed down to a few figures here and there whenever it was feasible to us based on our very, very limited amount of money coming in. But that collection was slowly starting to grow, and it was slowly starting to take up more and more space on the shelf in the little apartment that we were sharing with my wife's parents at the time. And I would always be thinking, the next time I go home, I'm gonna grab my old figures and I'm gonna bring them over and I'm gonna try and really make something of this collection, because I'm really enjoying it and I want to get those old figures back so I can get them back together again. Well, my birthday of 2019, disaster very, very nearly struck, because unbeknownst to me, my wife had hatched a cunning plan with my dad to get my Star Wars collection shipped over as a surprise for my birthday. Unfortunately, it almost resulted in me losing my entire collection, because that box that it was sent in didn't have a state on it, or a zip code, or my apartment number. And so this box that I have been collecting for a couple of years, with some figures in it that I have never seen since anywhere, went on pretty much a round the country trip all around the US, and it made its way back to Michigan completely by chance until it was sitting in a post office, and the postwoman looked at it and recognized my name on the box and just picked it up and brought it just in case and asked me if I recognized it. I had come that close to losing them all and I had them back by a complete stroke of luck. It was, well, I mean, I was thrilled. I didn't know my wife was up in the background having a heart attack at the time thinking that my collection has just been lost to the postal gods. Once I had the collection together and I had started working at that point, my collecting really started to take off. Originally, when we were doing these, we decided we were just going to get characters. We weren't going to get a ton of troopers, because I can take or leave troopers. It's the characters I really want to have represented on my shelf. Well, that didn't last very long, because I was quickly picking up a Death Trooper here, a Shore Trooper there. I was grabbing these figures whenever I saw them, and my collection just exploded and got so big so quickly. And that of course led into one of my favorite hunts from the entire history of my collecting career, which was looking for the original Red Line Mandalorian back in November of 2019. We looked everywhere for this guy, everywhere. And then he randomly showed up in a Meijer of all places. My wife was very pleased with herself when she brought that home. Moving into 2020, we were starting to become more financially stable-ish. We were able to save up enough money at our terrible job in order to buy our own house. We moved out. We finally had so much more space. We started getting involved in watching the news on social media and paying attention to which figures were coming out. We would look for pre-orders, and we actually pre-ordered a lot of figures. In fact, back then we pre-ordered the entire first wave of the Galaxy line, but it started to feel kind of redundant. Like, constantly buying everything as it came out started to feel a little stale, to be honest. I think the first time I started to feel it was I had pre-ordered the entire Moff Gideon wave, and I gradually found every single one of these figures on shelves. So I ended up cancelling my pre-order, saving a ton of money on shipping, and got them in person. In fact, I'm pretty sure I found them all on the same trip. And that was where I kind of made the decision that pre-orders are good for certain figures. Like, if there's a figure that I don't think I'm gonna get, because I was starting to experience what it felt like to go chasing a figure that I had missed, the Dr. Aphra trio really stands out in that regard. I was starting to realize that pre-ordering is good for that, but I enjoy the hunt. I enjoy going out in person and finding this stuff in stores. Figuring Dan and the Modal Nodes will remain forever one of my favorite toy hunts. Just going out and grabbing every single one of these guys in a store. In fact, I distinctly remember my wife brought the first one home, and that is still my Figuring Dan. He still stands at the front. When I found the second and third, I actually ended up leaving the third behind, because I ran into a fellow collector in the aisle, and he said it was the last one that he was looking for. And I was like, I'm just getting started with the Cantina Band, and I'm really enjoying this. So you take that one, I'll take this one. And for a minute, I didn't think I was going to find that one again. I thought I was going to get left missing one, because I did a nice thing. But sure enough, I got them all. a little later down the line, I finished out my entire Phoenix collection. I found Hera at Star Wars Celebration, and then Zeb came out, and I again had a situation where I had pre-ordered him, but I found him on a shelf, so I ended up cancelling my pre-order. I slowly began to realize that this is much more fun if you do it in person. Now, you know what? We often get forgotten about up in the Midwest. Like, distribution is just like, whatever we've got left, send to Michigan. But I have found some really, really great places going out and exploring, looking for figures. And that kind of leads me into 2022 and my decision to kind of return to YouTube, because I've had a YouTube channel for many, many years. I think I've been on YouTube for about 13 to 15 years now. I never really took it that seriously. The channel never really did very well. Obviously, I had my pretentious movie critic phase, because everybody has to go through that. And I'm really glad that phase didn't last very long, because my god, it's boring. And my wife and I tried to sort of do a soft reboot of the channel back in 2017 while we were living together in Bristol, but it didn't really take off because we didn't have anything to talk about. We didn't really have a focus. I knew I liked Star Wars. I knew I wanted to talk about it, but the environment in 2017 was so hostile. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's all sunshine and roses now, but it's reached a point where people are more open to discussion and they're more open to hearing an alternate point of view. And I think what really helped us out when we decided to do this is I feel like even though the algorithm is still pushing it, I feel like people are fed up with all the moaning. I feel like there are people out there who like these movies, like these shows, and like these toys, and they want to hear from someone else who likes them. So I found a lot of creators who were working in that kind of window. I found the Basement Boys, I found Land Speed and Luke, I found the Star Wars Cantina podcast, I found Action Display, people who were talking about Star Wars and talking about Star Wars toys and not just sitting there complaining about it. And don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of it as well. I used to watch that stuff all the time. I was a big fan of The Nostalgia Critic and, if you can believe it, CinemaSins. I used to watch that crap all the time, and I suddenly woke up and realized I don't enjoy this stuff anymore. This isn't the content that I want to watch, so it's not the content I'm going to create. And I started to pay attention to channels that talk passionately about the things that they love. And that very much leads me to where I am today with the YouTube channel. I enjoy talking about this stuff, and I enjoy speaking honestly about these toys because I love them so much. And I've built such a supportive community that I really, really enjoy being a part of, because it's people who are passionate about Star Wars and they are passionate about collecting action figures, but they don't let that passion turn into bitterness and bile and nonsense. So yeah, that pretty much drops me off at where I am today. That is the entirety of my updated collecting journey. This is still something that I am so pleased I have gotten involved in. It really is one of the best decisions I ever made. I love sitting here and talking about these toys every week and hearing from like-minded collectors who like talking about it too. So yeah, that was my updated Star Wars The Black Series collecting journey. A nice little update to the story of what led me from collecting these figures in the first place to talking about them on the internet. So I am very, very interested to hear from everybody else out there. What got you into collecting this line? What keeps you coming back to it? What makes you so pleased about it? Once again, a massive thank you to everybody who reached out about the wedding. I'm so glad that we finally got to have our wedding, and we'd only been married 5 years beforehand. It was really, really brilliant. I got everything I wanted out of it, and I am planning on doing a more in-depth talk about the wedding and how it went when we've got some more of the footage that we've actually paid for from the videographer and the photographer. I got a lot of candid stuff from the guests, and that's fantastic, but I really want to see how those real official photos and videos came out before I really talk in depth about the wedding. In the meantime, however, I've been Grand Moff Tony. That was my updated Black Series collecting journey. You may subscribe when ready. That was so much better than the original one. Tiba, we're done. We're finished. Are you awake? Hello.